Hi, I'm Kyla, and this is KP's Cookies, where I show you how I make cookies with love baked into every bite. Today, we're making my signature recipe, better than chocolate chip cookies. Welcome to my kitchen. Let's get started. As always, I make sure to prep all of my ingredients before we begin cooking. So, I've got my oven at 325 degrees, and I've got everything laid out and measured nicely before we even start attempting to melt butter, which is step one of my better than chocolate chip cookies. What I love about these cookies is that they're technically a one-pot cookie, unless you're like me and you put everything in bowls beforehand, but all you really need is one of these and a bunch of measuring cups. So what I do is I actually preheat my saucepan because I'm going to be melting the butter. Now, for cookies like these, where the butter is melted as opposed to creamed, where you actually leave the butter in its solid form but stir it really, really quickly until it starts to soften, what happens is you get this nice browned butter taste to them. Yeah, look at that. Sizzling. We don't want to cook the butter, but it has a much richer taste to it, which is very nice in a chocolate chip cookie. It's kind of like that hearty, just from mom's kitchen kind of taste. Get the rest of that butter in there. Let that go. In fact, I can actually remove it from the heat at this point because it's pretty much going to melt. Now the trick to these cookies, when you're using this melted butter, the hot butter, is to avoid making caramel and also to avoid making scrambled eggs because we are going to be adding sugar and eggs to the heated butter mixture. So making sure that the butter is fully melted first of all, but then properly cooled before you even begin adding ingredients, it's going to be key to making sure that these cookies are an absolute success. While the butter cools, we can talk a little bit about the other ingredients I'm going to use. I'm first of all going to be adding in sugar. Now, I'm using 2 parts brown sugar to 1 part white sugar. The brown sugar is dark brown sugar, not light brown sugar. I know it doesn't seem like a huge difference, but you'll notice it in the taste if you're really looking. I like to use dark brown sugar in my cookies just because it does give it that richer, fuller flavor. Now that my butter is warm but not cool, I'm going to be adding in the sugar because I do want it to caramelize just a little bit, or at least to get that heated sugar flavor. There we go. So 2 parts brown to 1 part white, all added in to this wonderful melted butter goodness. Those stirred in, make sure that there's not any lumps. Brown sugar has a tendency to be a little bit wetter than white sugar. You have to make sure that you store it properly so that it doesn't actually get those hard clumps. If you leave it out or exposed to any air, what happens is the brown sugar, all that moisture tends to get in, and then it'll get into those hard lumps, and then those are no fun to try to break up while you're stirring it into the butter. Alright, so now we're going to deal with the rest of the wet ingredients before we add in the last of the dry ones. So, step 1, vanilla. I am a huge fan of vanilla. I think it makes every cookie, or most every cookie, absolutely incredible. I love adding a little bit extra, in fact. This recipe kind of came about because I was a little bit overzealous with the vanilla. So, go ahead and stir that in, but it is part of the reason why I consider these my better than chocolate chip cookies. Now, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to avoid making scrambled eggs. You really do need to make sure that the temperature of the pan is not so high that when you crack your eggs in, you're going to end up cooking them instead. So, 2 eggs. Go. 1. 2. Okay, so we go ahead and beat the eggs in. about these cookies really is just their simplicity. So now that we have the wet ingredients in, we have a nice, beautiful, round mixture going here. All I'm going to do is put in the dry ingredients. Now, just like in my apple pie cookies, I like to add the leavening agents and the spices first before I put in the actual flour, which is what's going to form the actual base of the cookie. So we're going to start with my spices. I have what I consider my proprietary secret spice recipe, so don't worry too much about it. We're going to go ahead and add those in. Girl's got to have her secrets anyway. And my leavening agents. 1 part baking soda to 1 part salt. Alright, got that mixed in. And last but not least, the flour, which once again, since I don't have a stand mixture, I'm just going to be putting in a little bit at a time. Can get a little bit rough to mix, but it is worth it in the end to have done it all by yourself. Alright, so once your flour mixture looks like that, you get to add in everybody's favorite part, the chocolate chips. I do not skimp on these. In fact, they're probably the best part of the cookie, so if you're biting into a cookie with less than about 1,000,000 chocolate chips, you're not doing it right. So, let's mix that in, make sure that they are nice and evenly distributed. And you get this gloriously sticky looking chocolate chip mixture of goodness. In fact, I might even need to add some extra chocolate chips to that before we get them onto the baking pan. Now you'll find with these cookies that they're super sticky and that they're going to want to stay on your hands or spread out on the cookie sheet if you don't properly prepare with flour beforehand. So even though I use a certain amount of flour in the recipe, I actually reserve some to make sure that I have it all over my hands before I even handle the dough, and that I add a little bit extra into the dough as I go, just to kind of make sure that the dough itself is getting stable and solid. Alright, so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to start forming cookies. Okay, so the cookies are ready for the oven. Let's get them cooking. Right now, my kitchen smells absolutely heavenly. So let's go ahead and get these cookies out of the oven before they get too brown. As tempting as it may be to dive face first into these freshly baked cookies, you will want to give them a couple of minutes to cool. It's another reason why you might want to pull them out of the oven a few moments earlier than it seems like they need to be, because these cookies firm up and they also start to brown a little bit. So they're going to get that crackled top, chewy texture to them, but you do have to give them some time to sit. The best part is these cookies are infinitely adaptable, so if you want to add in walnuts, or M&Ms, or white chocolate chips, or macadamia nuts. There's a million different ways that you can make these cookies yours. Better Than Chocolate Chip Cookies are probably one of my favorite recipes. They're simple, they're easy, you can configure them to a number of different tastes. And I invented them in high school for my best friend Matt, who's currently in New Haven changing the lives of the children he teaches, so I dedicate this batch to him. Thanks so much for joining me here at KP's Cookies, where I bake cookies with love in every bite. And remember, love is FDA approved and recommended as a part of your healthy diet. So let me know if you want to try some. We'll see you next time.